For more, let's cross to David Camroux, who is adjunct professor at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. Thanks for joining us here on France 24.
My pleasure.
David, you and I are both old enough to remember the Marcos dictatorship and the revolution of 1986. Have the Filipinos forgotten it?
I think well, a lot of the Filipinos were not there. If I could just show a graph of the age group of the people who voted, 42% of the people who voted, were born after the Marcos dictatorship. I have no memories of it. And there was a massive disinformation campaign. 94% of all this disinformation seemed to be about Marcos and, actually glorifying the period of the Marcos dictatorship. That was not, it was a time of prosperity, it was a time of stability, it was a kind of golden age. And so that appealed to some of the voters. To the very poor, there's another kind of bizarre appeal, which is, yes, we know that Marcos put aside about $10 billion, but, once he becomes president, he'll be able to unlock that $10 billion and give it to the people. So it was a rather curious campaign. Do keep in mind that there are two peculiarities in the Filipino presidential voting system. The first is it's one round and not two rounds. So there were two main candidates, but there were 8 candidates altogether. And so the opposition to Marcos spent its time criticizing each other. Marcos himself refused any media interviews. He refused to take part in any debates during the campaign, because he knew he would be asked questions about his family. And of course, the second peculiarity is the vice president is elected separately. In this case, it is the daughter of the present president, Rodrigo Duterte. It's his daughter, Sara, who's possibly being groomed for the next presidential elections in 6 years' time. And that was a deal. Filipino politics is about political dynasties. And there's now a deal between the Marcos dynasty, the Duterte dynasty, perhaps the Arroyo dynasty as well, that, they'll each take their turn, they'll share the cake, so to speak, and that in 6 years' time, Sara will become president.
And that would mean 2, possibly 3 hardline populists in a row. How's democracy in the Philippines?
Democracy in the Philippines is dysfunctional. There is not a clear party system, which is why they've taken the American model, but it doesn't work in a political culture of bossism or patronage of political dynasties. It just doesn't work. And the voting system exacerbates these problems. And secondly, the fact is that the Filipinos do not feel that the state will do anything for them. They're amongst the happiest people in the world. They've got low expectations about what the state can do. And knowing that the state can do nothing for them, then obviously only a strong man or strong woman who will come in and through a war on drugs or some other kind of action will solve all their problems. So there is a really fundamental problem in the weakness of the Filipino state, which I think gets something like 20% of public expenditure and simply does not have the capacity to meet the needs of its people.
Is Bongbong Marcos his own man?
Bongbong Marcos is, I think, the word we use in Australia, he's a bit of a wanker. He's never had a job in his life other than being a politician. He's his mother's boy, but his mother is extremely old. So he may be his own man. The question is, in the absence of institutional checks and balances, will there be balances, will there be checks on him not, for example, declaring martial law like his father did? I think there will be those kinds of checks. There is this strong opposition expressed in the 30% vote for Leni Robredo. So there will be some checks, but The question is, will he try and show that he really is democratic in his behavior, in order to show that he is his own man, that he has turned where he sort of glorifies his father, but to say that was another period, and now I will try and unify the country, which is his more or less his campaign slogan.
One final question for you, David. What about when it comes to relations with neighbors? There was speculation that he's going to draw the Philippines closer to China. The same claim was laid on Rodrigo Duterte. It didn't quite pan out that way. How do you see the future when it comes to the United States and China?
I think you will see a repetition of what occurred under Duterte. He made declarations of becoming closer to China, but his acts were strengthening the alliance with the United States. Two things. The Filipinos are strongly anti-Chinese. Sure, China may invest, but if China's now stopping Filipino fishermen from earning their living, this is something that is totally unacceptable for Filipinos. And there is, the Philippines is very, very strongly pro-American. There is an enormous Filipino diaspora in the United States also. So, the visiting forces agreement will remain in place, I feel sure. And we've seen recent developments. The Americans will help the Filipinos to equip themselves more fully to be able to withstand the kind of intrusions of the Chinese, well, not so much the Navy, but the Coast Guard and their marine militias.
David Camroux of the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, many thanks for speaking with us.
Always my pleasure with you, Francois.